The stadium lights faded. The legal briefs piled up. And suddenly, a superstar's entourage started looking a lot like, well, an organized syndicate.
It is a genuinely jarring image. I mean, one minute you're watching an athlete just break tackles on Sunday, and the next you're reading these federal court filings that frankly feel more like a mob movie script than a standard sports dispute.
Right. And welcome to this deep dive where we are taking on a mission that really feels straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Today, we're unpacking the shocking headline, NFL star Stefon Diggs accused of hiring hitmen in shocking new lawsuit.
Yeah, it's a massive story.
It is. And we have a massive stack of sources right in front of us. I mean, we're looking at federal court filings, TMZ evidence reports, the U.S. court's own framework for complex litigation, and even international sports arbitration guidelines to, just try and make sense of all this.
Which is definitely necessary because with a story this explosive, the public relations spin usually just drowns out the actual legal reality.
Exactly. And look, our goal today isn't to play judge or jury. We're not taking sides here. We're impartially looking at the actual legal filings and the mechanical rules of the justice system to figure out how a star wide receiver ends up accused of running a coordinated hit.
Right, because we need to examine the evidentiary standards and the mechanics of civil litigation to understand what is actually happening behind closed doors, because, the headlines only tell a fraction of the story.
So true. So to understand how a football player gets accused of hiring hitmen, we really have to trace this timeline of alleged retaliation, and spans multiple states and involves two completely separate civil lawsuits.
Right. And the broader pattern kind of begins with a man named Nigel King. So back in July 2024, King arranged to transport Stefon Diggs' Ferrari to Houston. But the car ended up getting stolen.
Which is already crazy. But King claims he was never even identified as a suspect by the police.
Right, he wasn't.
But according to the lawsuit, by December 2024, Diggs allegedly began accusing King of the theft anyway. And then a full year later, so we're talking December 2025, Diggs' friends allegedly punched King in the face.
Yeah.
So King is now suing Diggs, his brother Darez Diggs, and 3 of their friends for defamation and assault.
And that case is important because it establishes this baseline allegation, right? Like a group willing to dole out physical punishment for perceived slights over a long period of time.
Right.
But that brings us to the much more complex and frankly far more severe case involving Christopher Blake Griffith.
Yes, and let's establish who Griffith is because the context really matters here. He's not just some random internet personality looking for clout.
No, not at all.
This is a sports and culture marketing executive with like a decade of experience. He worked at Under Armour, he consulted for massive athletes like Steph Curry, and he actually collaborated with Stefon Diggs on a fashion label called Liam Home.
Right. So they had an established working professional relationship. And that existing relationship really sets the stage for the central allegation of this entire legal war. Griffith claims that in May 2023, at Diggs' home in Rockville, Maryland, he was drugged with laced candy and sexually assaulted by the NFL star.
And we have to note, Diggs vehemently denies this.
Yes, absolutely.
In his court filings, he maintains he simply came home from a charity basketball game and just went straight to bed.
Right.
It's obviously a horrific allegation, but the lawsuit doesn't stop at the events of that night. It's the alleged retaliation a week later that actually generated that Hitmen headline.
Yeah, because Griffith alleges he was pulled from an elevator near his Los Angeles apartment by Stefon's brother, Darez Diggs, and 2 other men. Oh. And they brutally beat him and stole his phone. The lawsuit actually claims the explicit purpose of stealing the phone was to seize digital evidence of the alleged sexual battery in Maryland.
The injuries were severe, too. We were talking about a fractured leg, a meniscus tear, a traumatic brain injury, and PTSD.
Yeah, it was brutal.
And we know definitively that a physical altercation occurred because Darez Diggs later pleaded no contest to felony assault charges related to this exact incident.
Right, and Darez and an LA apartment complex actually recently reached a confidential $10 million settlement with Griffith.
Wow, $10 million.
Yeah, but Griffith's case against Stefon Diggs himself remains very active.
Okay, so this brings us to the newest evidence obtained by TMZ during the discovery phase, because this is what elevates the whole thing from a tragic assault to something much more, organized.
Exactly. We are talking about phone logs and text messages from Stefon Diggs' own assistant.
Right.
These texts allegedly show the assistant actively coordinating the attack, like booking flights and hotel arrangements for one of the assailants on the actual day of the beatdown.
That's wild.
And furthermore, the phone logs allegedly show that Stefon Diggs made a call to that same assailant literally during the attack. Griffith claims this call lines up perfectly with surveillance footage showing the assailant on his phone right there in the apartment building.
Okay, but wait. Having your assistant book a flight isn't inherently illegal. I mean, celebrities have their staff book travel for family and friends all the time.
Sure, yeah.
So how does a civil court differentiate between a poorly behaved celebrity entourage and an actual criminal enterprise? Because when I was reading up on how federal courts handle complex litigation, there's a really specific framework for this.
There is, yeah.
If a star is using his staff to book flights across state lines for a violent act, aren't we borderline looking at a RICO violation, like the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act?
That is exactly where the definition of an enterprise comes into play under federal law. See, a court doesn't just look at the punch thrown in the elevator.
Right.
It looks at the logistics behind the punch. Civil aguia claims are actually often used creatively in business and celebrity disputes to establish a pattern of coordinated action.
Okay, so what are they looking for?
Well, the federal manual specifically asks plaintiffs to detail the structure, purpose, roles, and function of the enterprise.
So they're looking for it like the division of labor.
Precisely. A court examines whether there is an ongoing organization that functions as a continuing unit.
Got it.
When you have an assistant handling logistics, funding flights and hotels, and a principal allegedly making phone calls to direct or monitor the action from afar, the court asks a key question.
Which is?
Are the defendants separate from this enterprise, or do they constitute the enterprise? The coordination elevates the legal exposure exponentially.
Which is why that Hitmen headline is actually anchored in a very real legal theory about organized retaliation.
Exactly. It's not just a buzzword.
And, you know, that's just the physical violence. But wait till you hear what came out in the digital war of text messages. It's a complete PR nightmare that's currently playing out in federal court.
It really is.
And real quick, if you're fascinated by the hidden mechanics behind these massive pop culture and sports stories, take a second to subscribe to the feed so you never miss our future deep dives.
Because the transition from the physical attacks to the courtroom battle over digital evidence, it just completely shifts the battlefield. Physical violence leaves bruises, but digital footprints win lawsuits.
Okay, so let's clarify how this specific lawsuit actually started, because Griffith didn't sue Diggs first.
No, you didn't.
In November 2025, Diggs sued Griffith for defamation. Diggs claimed Griffith was spreading malicious lies online and deliberately tagging brands like UGG and the New England Patriots to, ruin Diggs's endorsement deals.
Right, and then Griffith countersued for the assault.
Yes, and that initial lawsuit by Diggs is what actually triggered a massive media misconception recently.
Totally. The story broke that Griffith submitted over 100 pages of iMessages and Instagram direct messages to the court.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
And the press painted this as Griffith dropping an unsolicited, vindictive bombshell text dump just to humiliate Diggs in the court of public opinion.
But before we go any further, we should really define discovery, because in civil lawsuits, you can't just hide your cards.
No, not at all.
Discovery is that legal phase where a judge essentially forces both sides to hand over their emails, texts, travel logs, and receipts. So it wasn't a random PR stunt by Griffith. Griffith had actually blocked Diggs on Instagram months prior. And because he was blocked, Diggs's legal team couldn't access their own old chat logs.
Exactly. So Diggs's team actually filed a formal request asking a judge to compel Griffith to hand over the records.
Right. The 100-page submission was literally just a mandatory response to Diggs's own legal request.
Yeah, it is a perfect example of how routine legal procedures just get completely twisted by the media.
It really is.
But, the discovery disputes get much more strategic from there because now they are fighting over travel records.
Oh, right.
Diggs's team is demanding Griffith turn over his travel itineraries from that initial May 2023 trip to Maryland.
Okay.
And Griffith's lawyers are fighting back, stating that Diggs's own camp arranged and paid for this trip, meaning those records are at least equally within Stefon's possession.
Wow. So by doing that, Griffith is essentially forcing Diggs to admit on the record that his team coordinated the travel.
Yeah.
It ties Diggs much closer to the timeline of the alleged assault.
Exactly. And then there's the financial discovery, which is where this just gets brilliant from a legal strategy perspective.
Right, because Filing a defamation suit is kind of like pulling a fire alarm. You get everyone's attention, but you also invite the fire marshal to inspect your whole house.
That's a great way to put it. Diggs sued for defamation, claiming Griffith's allegations cost him lucrative opportunities and real money.
Right.
So Griffith's legal team basically said, great, prove it. Open up your comprehensive financial records.
Because the legal principle is pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
If you claim financial damages in a defamation suit, you actually have to be prepared to prove those exact monetary losses in open court.
Yes. Griffith's team literally argued that Diggs, quote, does not get to sue and hide behind closed books.
Wow.
By claiming he lost money, Diggs essentially gave Griffith the legal right to audit his entire financial life.
The irony is just staggering. I mean, Diggs initiated this defamation lawsuit to protect his brand and his reputation, right?
Right.
But the mechanical process of civil discovery is now forcing his private texts, his travel logs, his assistant's phone records, and his private finances into the public record.
And a federal judge is actively holding him to this standard. On June 3rd, the judge ordered Diggs to give a truthful, complete, and non-evasive response within 14 days detailing his exact relationship with Griffith.
Because Diggs had previously tried to brush him off as just an acquaintance, right?
Exactly, and the judge ruled that was insufficient. Diggs also has to identify every single person present at his Rockville home during the time in question, and that's under threat of legal sanctions.
Diggs did win one small victory in that ruling, though. The judge said he doesn't have to answer questions about any prior drug possession.
Right, which is something.
But the pressure of discovery is clearly mounting, and it really seems to be getting to him emotionally. I mean, he recently posted on social media, writing that Griffith is, quote, a N-word lying on my name because he got caught stealing.
Yeah, which immediately prompted Griffith's team to amend their complaint and add a brand new defamation charge against Diggs.
Wow.
Because in litigation, every single public statement is fresh ammunition.
It is literally a textbook example of why defense attorneys try to confiscate their clients' phones during a lawsuit.
Oh, absolutely. When you're in the middle of a massive civil dispute, the court is analyzing your temperament just as much as your evidence.
Right. And later in the deep dive, we'll talk about the shocking twist regarding the NFL's response to all this. Because, with his texts, travel logs, and financials being dragged into federal court, you probably assume his career is suspended.
You would think so.
But the league's verdict totally defies that logic. So stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our deep dives into the hidden machinery of pop culture.
Yeah, because the irony of all this exposure in civil court is that his actual employer, the NFL, looked at this mountain of drama and effectively shrugged.
It's wild. How does a player with this much legal heat avoid league discipline?
Well, let's look at his status in the league. Diggs turns 33 in November 2026. And last season with the Patriots, he had 85 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and he helped their quarterback Drake May finish as the MVP runner-up.
Yeah, he is undeniably talented.
He is. But New England still cut him in March, and he remains an unsigned free agent right now.
Yet the NFL recently released a statement saying there would be no discipline for Stefon Diggs under its personal conduct policy due to, quote, insufficient evidence.
But the massive twist here is that the NFL's clearance had absolutely nothing to do with Christopher Griffith or the Hitmen allegations or the stolen Ferrari.
All right.
The NFL was actually investigating a third, completely separate incident.
Okay, yeah. So in December 2023, Diggs was charged with felony strangulation and misdemeanor assault involving his live-in personal chef, Jameel Adams, at his Massachusetts home.
Right.
But a Massachusetts jury acquitted him of all charges in less than 2 hours.
Because the defense showed the jury a video of Adams dancing shortly after the alleged incident.
Exactly. And the rapid acquittal in criminal court is what the NFL actually used to clear him of conduct violations.
Which really highlights the deeply complex parallel tracks of justice for a professional athlete. I mean, you have the criminal courts, the civil courts, and then the league's own internal arbitration.
Yeah, and I was reading our source material on the Court of Arbitration for Sport, or the CAS, and comparing their evidentiary standards to the NFL's. It's fascinating.
It's very different.
In international sports doping, athletes are essentially held to strict liability. Like, if a banned substance is in your body, you are guilty unless you can practically prove a negative.
Right.
There was that example in the text where an athlete actually had to use a hair follicle test going back months to prove they hadn't consumed more than 10 milligrams of cocaine just to establish they weren't a, quote, regular user and mitigate their sanction.
Yeah, because the burden of proof in that CAS arbitration is heavily on the athlete to explain how a substance entered their body without fault. They literally have to produce scientific evidence to override the governing body's assumption of guilt.
So why is the NFL's personal conduct policy so different? I mean, why does the NFL need to find sufficient evidence of a crime when other sports bodies just assume guilt based on a positive test?
Well, it really comes down to the collective bargaining agreement and the fundamental difference between what these bodies are actually governing.
Yeah.
The CAS often governs physiological fairness, right? Doping is a strict liability offense because the presence of the substance is an objective, measurable fact that directly alters competition.
Right, it physically changes the game.
Exactly. But the NFL's personal conduct policy essentially governs behavioral PR. It is highly subjective and it requires fact-finding.
Got it.
The NFL operates on what is called a balance of probabilities, meaning they just have to believe it is more likely than not that a violation occurred to suspend a player.
And they have suspended players without criminal convictions before, right? Like Ben Roethlisberger or Ezekiel Elliott.
They absolutely have, mostly to protect the image of the league.
But because Diggs went to trial in the Chef case and the jury acquitted him so quickly, the NFL essentially just used the jury's rapid verdict as PR cover. Like, he beat the criminal charge. So the NFL didn't feel the need to apply their own balance of probability standard.
That rapid acquittal basically gave the league the justification they needed to keep a star on the field.
Right.
But here is the massive danger for Diggs moving forward. Civil court operates on an entirely different standard than criminal court.
Yeah, the criminal justice system requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So you have to be, say 99% sure.
Exactly. But civil cases like the ones brought by Griffith and King, they only require a preponderance of the evidence.
Meaning they just have to prove that it is 51% likely that Diggs did what they claim he did.
Right. They just have to tip the scale a fraction of an inch. So while his quick acquittal in the criminal trial regarding his chef saved him from the league's wrath, it offers zero protection in these civil suits.
The NFL's clearance won't save his bank account.
No, it won't. And because civil court has such a low threshold for forcing discovery, the NFL's decision doesn't stop the federal judge from exposing his texts, his travel logs, and his financial records to the public.
So you can actually win in criminal court, and you can win with your employer, but still face total systemic exposure in civil litigation.
Yes. A single civil lawsuit can trigger a legal avalanche that basically exposes the entire operational structure of a star's life.
Man, it really is a lot. So just bringing this all together for you listening, we've unpacked a sprawling, multi-state legal war today. I mean, we are looking at allegations of orchestrated hitmen, stolen Ferraris, and these massive digital discovery battles where a defamation suit operates like a fire alarm, forcing a star to hand over his own private life.
Yeah.
All while there's a desperate fight to salvage an NFL career across 3 completely separate jurisdictions.
It really illustrates the sheer mechanical danger of modern celebrity litigation. The legal tools available to plaintiffs in civil court are literally designed to dismantle secrecy.
Which leaves us with a pretty lingering thought to mull over. As modern athletes and celebrities build these massive personal brands, they inevitably build massive entourages to manage those brands, book their travel, and handle their daily logistics.
Right.
But when digital forensics can link an assistant's flight booking or a brief phone call directly to a violent assault across the country, is the classic entourage actually a star's biggest legal liability?
That's the real question.
As the digital footprint of our daily lives becomes almost impossible to erase, when exactly does the protective bubble of fame cross the legal line and become a criminal enterprise?
It is a profound question, and honestly, one that is going to be tested in federal court very soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We respect your time, and we'll catch you on the next conversation.